Well, if you were lulled into a fashion reverie by those Dior, Gucci, and Saint Laurent slides, you might have not exactly have been expecting that giant COVID swab to suddenly emerge from the screen, but that's life now, right? Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Vanessa Friedman, Chief Fashion Critic at the New York Times, and this is the start of Fashion Month, that exhilarating, occasionally jaw-dropping collection circus that spans New York, London, Milan, and Paris every September. Only this Fashion Month isn't exactly going to look like other fashion months. The global pandemic has changed the landscape. Instead of a host of live shows, we have a series of almost existential questions. What does fashion even mean in lockdown? Do trends exist when we barely leave our homes? Do we even need clothes anymore, especially given what we know about their impact on the environment? And what does that mean for all of us and an industry that employs thousands of people around the world? Fashion isn't dead, but there's no question it's facing a long overdue moment of change. Throughout history, times of great crisis have given rise to times of great creative flowering and the joy of expressing ourselves through clothes. The Dark Ages and the Renaissance, the flu of 1918 and the flappers, World War II and the New Look, the oil crisis of the 1970s, and Saint Laurent's boho deluxe. So what's next this time around? This is the beginning of On the Runway, a new month-long virtual event series, which will be both a behind-the-scenes exploration of the industry's most chaotic and maybe courageous fashion month yet. We'll take you inside studios and shows in the big fashion cities as some of the most fascinating voices in the industry provide key insights about how fashion is meeting this unprecedented moment. Before we begin, though, a few housekeeping notes. I want to let everyone know this event's being recorded. We've also asked our audience to send in some questions ahead of time, and we'll get to those at the end. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce a panel of speakers who are going to start all of this off. Tory Burch, zooming in from New York. Hi, Tory. The designer and founder of Tory Burch, who has spent lockdown not only fighting for aid for the American fashion industry in Washington, but who has also given new meaning to the home office, as everyone can see. Virgil Abloh, joining from Wisconsin. Hey, Virgil. Hey. Chief Creative Director of Off-White and Artistic Director of Louis Vuitton menswear, who has been busy rewriting the rules, both when it comes to the definition of a fashion show and who exactly gets access to the halls of fashion power. Gwyneth Paltrow, coming to us from Long Island. Hi, Gwyneth.
Hi.
Goop CEO and founder, whose direct-to-consumer business offers a slightly different view of the pandemic effect, one that has gotten more and more personal. In case anyone was wondering, that picture from a dress launched earlier this summer, it does include her mom. And Antoine Arnault, beaming in from Paris. Salut, Antoine.
Salut.
Chief Executive of Berluti and Head of Communications for LVMH, which has launched two rather large announcements this morning about Fendi and Tiffany. Thank you for that. LVMH is also the largest luxury group in the world, owner of over 75 brands, including Dior, Givenchy, Fendi, and Louis Vuitton, though possibly not Tiffany, and not only the first to pivot from making luxury handbags and champagne to making masks and hand sanitizer, but also among the first to declare their allegiance to the return of real live fashion shows. Thank you guys all for being here and for agreeing to face our firing squad. Just kidding. All right, let's plunge right in. First question to do with the answer, the question at hand, which is really fashion shows. This season is going to see mostly digital shows. Many of the biggest names are actually sitting the season out or having shows later. So I got to ask, what's the point? Virgil, I'm going to start with you because you just actually had a show, although maybe not the kind that we're used to in Shanghai. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the thinking was behind it?
Yeah, as this is an unprecedented year, of our existence, I think if you compartmentalize what fashion industry gives to the people, there's a huge component of it that is aspiration. It's a part of our fabric of culture. This idea of garments and sort of wardrobe. What I wanted to do is do a show that borrowed more from film and theatrical experience to give a positive message. That was very much the intention, is when you see an image of a parade or when you see an image of a dramatic play, that can bestow an emotion across the screen. So I created a fashion show, sort of in quotes, that led more from a feeling of theatrics and parade to sort of give a positive message to say that underneath the practicality of clothes, my studio has an ambition that the world can be a better place.
But how did you do that? I mean, what do you mean when you say parade? What did it actually look like?
Yeah, so what I did is instead of a traditional runway show that could be very serious with models with serious gazes on their face walking down the runway show, like sort of almost being like hangers for clothing, what I did is I put focus on the ambiance. And so almost like a Thanksgiving Day parade moving through New York, that was the set design. And the models were street casted, they were just locally, and they're just walking down the streets as if they were conversing with friends, sort of bestowing that feeling that we're not generally awarded in this time, but having that be the context to look at my fashion design instead of like a very serious one.
And Tori, you're not even having a show this season, right? You are one of the skippers.
Oh, yeah, I'm one of the skippers. No, listen, strangely, before the pandemic, I decided not to show this season. And I don't know that you know that, but we were opening a store on Mercer Street. And I thought it would be really interesting to go back to where we were when we first launched this company. And that was a store event that lasted the day and had everyone come and stop by and see things in a more personal way and up close. So I was doing that anyway. That said, I think as the pandemic hit, I've sort of really gone back in my history of growing up and nostalgia and the Quaker Meeting House and Shaker. And so we're doing a shoot and we're going to do a virtual lookbook. And it's going to be in this beautiful Shaker style house that's in Massachusetts. And I'm thinking a lot about just sort of where I've been, and also the product, the simplicity, the quality, and then showing people in a more personal way.
But does it actually replace a show for you, or do you think at some point you'll go back to it?
No, I mean, listen, I think it depends on the collection. And I think I love showing. We didn't start showing until 2013. So, and we've always done things differently. Last year, as you know, we showed at Sotheby's because I worked with a friend who's an artist. So that made sense. So I think it will just depend, but I love the idea of showing. And I think that the collection will determine whether we go back to showing.
Antoine, most of your brands also love the idea of showing. And in fact, when I look at the schedule, the ones that I know that are in fact going to be physical shows are primarily LVMH brands. Are you guys crazy to be doing that, or do you just so believe in it that you think it's important?
No. First of all, we're doing it differently. I mean, obviously showing with or without an audience is not exactly the same type of feel for a show. Certain brands don't have to show, and for example, Berluti has not shown in July and probably will not show in January, but that's a choice. For bigger brands that have the means to produce these shows, it's fantastic that they continue to have this creative world live. And by the way, showing is not only a personal decision. I mean, there's a whole economy around these shows that should not be underestimated. So I think, there's as many answers as there are brands. It's true that our bigger brands tend to have decided to show. The smaller ones definitely don't. And it's a good way also of rethinking the whole process. And economically, it makes sense, obviously, to skip a season or two, and then we'll come back to it. It's definitely expensive, and when you realize the price it costs, then once you didn't do it, you're actually quite relieved.
I mean, Gwyneth, speaking of that, you've actually managed to avoid this whole circus. Do you think, are you smarter than everyone else when it comes to this, or do you think, that there's a real place for shows?
I'm definitely not smarter than anybody, especially on this call. But, I think when we started doing G-Label on Goop, it was really to solve my own problem, which was I did start to feel like the fashion system, how it was operating was a little bit hard to access and possibly a little antiquated in terms of the schedule. And I really responded to the streetwear cadence of drops and the buy now, wear now, and building up some excitement and pent up demand around a collection. And so, and also really playing with that direct to consumer model in fashion. So I wondered if the economics of like a Warby Parker model or something like that could be applicable to a made in Italy fashion line. And we just started kind of testing it out. And I think our customers really responded to that. I think women really do like the buy now, wear now model. And I think, you know, doing a limited number of units to kind of get people engaged seems to work, but we're always sort of playing with thresholds and trying to figure out the best way to do it. But it's worked for us so far.
I mean, let's talk for a second about something that a lot of people have posited, which is that this marks a kind of tipping point in fashion where, you know, things are going to devolve from a top-down calendar, highly scheduled model where we all sort of march in lockstep every September, October, February, March, and really be, as Antoine, as you said, like every brand for itself. You know, do you guys actually think that's going to happen? Does it make sense? And you know, what does that mean? Let's do a lightning round. I'm just going to go across my screen. Antoine, what do you think?
It's difficult to answer today. I think a lot is going to be decided after this next couple of rounds of shows. It's definitely not essential. However, you know, you sometimes need to show what you're actually creating. So sorry not to be able to answer right now and today, but it's definitely too early. What I can tell you is that it does create a whole new level of creativity in all those planning agencies and event agencies, and they're full of good ideas for us to still show and still be able to create in a different manner.
Tory, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that every company is different. For us, a lot of the schedule was also driven by wholesale, and we're 85% direct to consumer. So when you think about Fashion Week, that will probably continue once the world gets back to some sense of normalcy. But I think when for us, we're in a unique position because we control our deliveries for the most part, and when we want to do it. But I think every company is different, and people have to. Maybe it will be interesting that people won't be so strident. There won't be a stringent thing of you have to do this when, and people will be able to embrace their own model.
God, I don't know. I'd be running around like a headless chicken if everyone embraces.
Yeah, it might not be good for you. Sorry.
Virgil, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, just putting my creative hat on and leaving off the sort of like business or the engine behind the creativity, I think we're looking at a sort of watershed moment for the next generation to really take their seat. You know, I'm an optimist and that's like what gets me through the day, but I feel like we're at a place where we know the names of Karl Lagerfeld, Margiela, Yves Saint Laurent, you know, how they revolutionized the industry by switching from couture to ready to wear, or you know, and my generation, obviously we brought terms like streetwear into the fold, and now we see that effect on the sort of luxury market. I think that this is a moment where we can redefine what fashion means to the broader public at large. And I think even though it's come at like uncertain with the pandemic and obviously the things that led that tie in with that, it's like we're at a moment to sort of re-engage and make fashion meaningful.
Gwyneth, what do you think?
I mean, I think there'll probably be a separation between the brands that are enormous and global and really well funded and use those shows as an amazing marketing moment and as theater to kind of proliferate culture with the brand. And then for smaller brands like mine, I think we will continue to focus on culture, building culture and creating a connection with product through a cultural moment. And I think it's good. It forces all brands, big and small, to really get more creative around how to reach the customer.
I mean, in the beginning, shows really were conceived as the most efficient means of communication, right? Both to the press and to retailers. What you guys are talking about seems to be increasingly a divide between those two things, that shows become largely a vehicle of communication and a kind of, live or digital or imagined explanation of what a collection is, and then the buying side will sort of happen separately. Do you think that's actually what's going on? Antoine, what do you think?
But it's for sure one of our biggest marketing tools. And when we look at the response we have on our social networks, or even the response of our customers, they see the show as something much bigger than any advertising campaign. So it's important for us to continue to, make that moment exist. As you know, the cruise collections have been hugely successful in the past few years. I know they made you travel around the world many times and in remote places, but they're a huge success, and they weren't even on the calendar a few years ago. So, no, I mean, our shows have become stages for our brands, and are not only for the buyers, for the brands who do wholesale. So that for sure, in my opinion, will continue. Maybe with a little bit less of this frenetic rhythm, and maybe we'll try to use this crisis as an opportunity to rethink the way we do it, but it won't stop. That's my opinion.
So, I mean, talking about, clothes and the opportunity to rethink things, one of the things that I keep hearing, I'm sure we all keep reading, is that we're all just living in sweatpants now, and no one wants to dress up anymore, and there's no real reason to do that. So I want to talk to you guys about what you're actually designing, but first I'd actually like you to stand up and show us what you're wearing, so I can see, check and make sure you're wearing.
Busting us, isn't it?
Come
I'm
on.
wearing shorts.
Everyone. I always sweatpants, my favorite ones.
I'm in my socks.
I'm wearing
No
sweatpants.
shoes.
All right, so Tory, in this period, I mean, what do you think? Are you like doing athleisure, or are you doing something else?
I mean,
what are we going to be wearing next?
No surprise to me that our sport sold incredibly well during now and during the pandemic. And I think that, obviously people are dressing more casually and interested in the more casual aspect. But what's interesting to me is that people are buying investment pieces, and people are buying across categories. If you asked me this question three months ago in March, I'd have a very different answer. But with the hindsight of the last few months and seeing what the customer is really being drawn to, they still want to experience joy and dream. And they are buying, I don't know where they're going, but they are buying things that they're probably dreaming about where they want to go. And certainly whether they're dressing for Instagram or small parties or whatever they're doing, they're looking at fashion in a way that's helping them escape.
No, I can confirm that, and I can tell you that probably in a world where you can't really go out as much, and restaurants are mostly closed, and nightclubs are closed, and events don't happen, people still need to feel that moment of joy that they get through buying something that they love or that they desired for a long time. So we don't sell only sweatpants and shorts, definitely not. I mean, the formal aspect of our sales is still very high, and I can tell you for being on holiday in south of France that even without a lot of restaurants open or only outdoors, people still dress up, and they enjoy that. So it definitely continues. I don't know, maybe anecdotally there's a few more sweatpants sold, but formal is still alive.
Are you selling couture ball gowns?
That I don't know.
Gwyneth, what about you? You just had a dress launch. Why? I mean, why dresses, and how did it did astonishingly well, right?
It did really well. We were nervous about the timing, but again, I think we're sort of going for a dressed up / casual, very comfortable vibe, like a trend free, easy to wear vibe. That's sort of what we do. And I was surprised at how well the dresses did. I mean, they're very easy, and they're at a really good price point. And, I think I also have a slightly different perspective because we also we're a multi-brand retailer as well. We sell home. So it's been interesting to see throughout the time where people's focus have gone from a lot of loungewear and, home workout products to cookware to home, and now back into fashion.
Yeah, I've got to say, if I never see my shorts again, I think I'll be happy. Virgil, you actually caused a great controversy earlier this year when you said what I think has been slightly misinterpreted, something about streetwear being over or dead. Do you still, I mean, where do you stand on that now? Where do you think this is going?
No, it's important to me to be a thought leader amongst a designer. This is not just like a fashionable profession for me. It takes a lot of thinking, a lot of observation, because I believe in this career and seeing it evolve to go to even better places than where it is now. And I think, streetwear is such a buzz term. It came on the scene from obscurity, and then largely is thought of as just like putting a logo on a shirt because that sells more than maybe selling formal wear. And if you look at what I'm doing at Vuitton is sort of like an intellectual mix to make a tailored suit just as fashionable as a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or sweatpants. So even in this, the year 2020, this sort of reimagining of what fashion is, I think it's important to see what are trends and what are sort of lasting sort of tropes of design. And I think that it's an intelligent mix.
You actually believe in a trend? Does everyone believe trends still exist? Virgil?
I think they they're like this thing with social media, and pieces that sell out immediately that have people clamoring for more. I would very much say that trends are very much alive and they're very much cycling.
Gwyneth, do you agree? Trends are alive?
I have a 16-year-old girl in my house, so yes, I would say trends are very much alive.
Tory, you too?
For me, but
Yeah, I do. I also love the idea of things that are forever as well. And I think people are looking at that as well. They're really looking at things that they can buy and invest in.
Let's talk about that and this whole sort of question of sustainability, which means so many different things, right? It's about sustaining your business, sustaining the livelihoods of the people who work with you, sustaining sustainability as it regards to the environment and supply chains. I mean, it's incredibly multi-layered as a concept and very, very complicated. And I wonder, how you guys prioritize those questions, especially in a pandemic when, business was obviously challenged, no matter how good it is. I mean, Antoine, how do you guys start? Because LVMH, kind of wither LVMH, wither fashion.
Well, it's always been at the forefront of our objectives, whether short or long term. So obviously, during this pandemic, we tried to tell our managers to not unprioritize sustainability in their way of managing their business. You can have a quite natural reflex to when you're asked by your shareholder to cut as much as you can and be careful and revise budgets to downgrade that extremely important topic. However, none of them did, and we were quite happy of that. So probably the work that we've been doing for the past 20 years on that topic is now engraved in our priority values. So as you say, it's not only environment, but being responsible in that field is extremely important. And the work that we're doing all these years is finally paying off. I feel that it's becoming something that's as important for them as it is for us.
But isn't the simplest solution the easiest first step when it comes to fashion and sustainability to make less stuff? Just to make less stuff? And I mean, is that like, Tory, how do you think about that?
I mean, we are fanatics when it comes to managing inventory. And that is, I think, one of the biggest things that a lot of people don't talk about enough is the just overproducing of stuff. So we are really careful with that and getting better. And I think when I think about sustainability, I think it's a given that we all need to do and make this a top priority. For us, it is a top priority because it's the right thing to do. It's not about messaging what we do because we're working on a lot of initiatives that I think are going to be transformative and things that we all should be looking at, whether it's materials, whether it's making less inventory, whether it's our packaging, how we package, how we ship, how we light offices. And then to your point, sustainability, you have social compliance as well, making sure that people are doing well and treated well in our factories and things like that. So it's all encompassing. I think it's a bit Herculean of what we have to do as an industry, but we have to do it. And we all need to move forward on that if we're going to, if our children are going to be okay. I really, truly think it's very critical for us.
Yeah, I mean, fashion is kind of the Augean stables, isn't it? We have this just like huge backlog of crap. I'll say that. In our systems, right? In the way we do things. So one of the things actually.
Just one little precision on that. I mean, the top end of the industry, I'm not saying is far from perfect, and we have a lot of things that we can do better, but has very little inventory compared to obviously fast fashion and the way of making a caricature of the fashion world being one of the most polluting industries in the world is probably true. But if you look at the luxury sector in particular, it's actually not very polluting. Our inventory is super low. We recycle as much as we can, and it's I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's very high. So we cannot mix everybody in the same dish. That's just not how it works.
Well, I think there are clearly different issues, right, with luxury and with fast fashion, I think, but every sector has its own issues, or every segment of fashion has its own issues that you're wrestling with. Otherwise, we would need to make these issues systemic priorities. And, it's great that they are getting there. Gwyneth, one of the things I'm interested in is someone who, has a relatively young business compared to the other ones. In a way, you could build some of these issues in from the beginning. Is that something you thought about? And how did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tory said it really well when you talk about tightly managing inventory, making sure that at the end of the season you have as little to recycle or dispose of as possible. I think we started in skin and beauty, so approaching it from a highly efficacious but non-toxic standpoint was really important to us in terms of the sustainability of our health and longevity. And I do think that, especially on the fashion side, we've been spending a lot of time over the last year looking at the supply chain and trying to understand what is the minimal impact we can make. But of course, it's a process for everybody. And I think Tory's right that it's something that's so critically urgent right now that it's our responsibility as founders and operators to do whatever we can in as urgent a manner as possible.
And Virgil, how involved are you in these questions?
100%. As Antoine sort of laid the groundwork at LVMH and Vuitton, where we sit in this particular segment where I believe my responsibility is great because I sit at the artistic direction position of one of the major houses. And as we've sort of spoken about, for me, it's important to make sustainability fashionable, as we said, trend focused. In the last collection, I debuted these patches that go on to specific garments that me and my studio are recycling. So if you buy a piece, you're almost more drawn to one that aligns with your personal goals about sustainability. And even furthermore, I debuted this idea of collapsing all my seasons into one. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to sort of remove from the customer's mind just because it's last season that it's devalued. And so for me, I announced that, and making everything on even keel is important to the logic of how I create.
If you take out the idea of seasons, if you take out seasonality, does that hurt you potentially economically or not? Or does it just raise the stakes for designers to make more beautiful stuff or more covetable stuff? What do you think, Tory?
I don't think it hurts you. I mean, I think women are thinking differently about the way they shop. I don't think they're thinking I want to wear something and not wear it again. I don't think it's a modern way of thinking anymore. I think people want to invest in, they're buying less, and they want the things that they buy to be more meaningful and have longevity. So from a season standpoint, we also are looking at it differently, where we're consolidating, and it's more about deliveries and wearing things when you want to wear them. I think that's, goes back to the buy now, wear now, but that just makes sense. And I think, I don't know, I think women are looking for things that uplift them, but they want to have in their wardrobes. They want to build their wardrobes for the long term. And of course, they're not turning over closets anymore. They're not changing, when was that? 10 years ago, people would change their spring closet to their fall closet. That's obsolete. That's just not happening.
Gwyneth, do you see the same thing? And in fact, like, do you wear stuff from 10 years ago, 15 years ago that you have?
I do. I'm a big believer in, I've personally never dressed in an overtly trendy way. I mean, I've had a few dodgy moments, I think, in my past, but
Haven't we all?
but so I've always tended to buy sort of more classic trend-free pieces, and I do. I mean, I have things, old Calvin Klein that I wear, and old Ralph Lauren, and I mean things from more than 10 years ago even.
Antoine, do you advocate getting rid of seasons?
Well, listen, there's also a market reality that we have to understand. I'm not sure if we decide to have only one season for all our brands, that would really change the way others make business. Just one little point I have to say about this sustainability issue is that it's not only by grace of heart that we decide to do it. It's also very simply because economically, LVMH also owns quite a large number of wines and spirit brands. If temperatures increase by 1, 2, or 3 degrees, we just simply will not be able to make champagne anymore in 20 or 30 years. So there's also this aspect that is not only because it's the nice thing to do and the right thing to do, but also because our future, our economical future depends on it.
And I think, I don't know what you guys are seeing, but certainly it feels that consumers are increasingly, concerned about this issue, and, and curious about it and educated about it in a way that maybe even 5 years ago people weren't. And, and are asking questions of brands like yours, about all these questions, as well as, the other extremely pressing issue of the moment, which is really the social justice movement, and and what that means for an industry that, if we just look at this panel, is is very white. And certainly we had a lot of questions about that when we announced this event. And I think if you look at this, we are kind of a reflection of the faults and the reality of the industry at the moment. And I am really interested in how you guys are taking that on board. Antoine, in particular, you guys just announced a new designer at Fendi Women's Wear, Kim Jones, who is incredibly talented, but also is another white man. Did you think about the issue of diversity in that choice?
Well, to be very honest, on this particular nomination, no. But we also, decide these things way in advance, and so, well, no. The quick answer is no. However, this topic of diversity, this topic of inclusion has been, as you know, at the forefront of our priorities, not only with the Black Lives Matter movement, but way before. It's something that can be resolved long term. It's not something by taking a quick action, by nominating a new Black designer that will that anything will be solved. We have a lot of work to do on this topic. We acknowledge it, and we are absolutely conscious of it. We've published our ethnical data in the United States, so we're not ashamed of it. And when you look at the results, it's actually pretty good in terms of representation of different races in our statistical data. You know that we're not allowed to do that statistical data anywhere else. In many countries, it's illegal. In France, for example, you're not allowed to do what we to measure what we published in the US a couple of months ago. However, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, you probably saw that on our board, we have 0 non-whites present. That will, I very, very much hope so, change in the near future. But it's not something that we can change in a few weeks, and it's something that needs to be thought through and taken with measure, and that needs to work for the long term.
And Tory, I mean, other than what we've seen, the kind of easy, immediate reactions from fashion brands, which are public statements, donations to Black Lives Matter groups, and and unconscious bias training. What are you doing? What do you think can be done to change?
I mean, this is a subject I care deeply about, and my business plan was to start a foundation. Originally, it was for women, but our foundation several years ago started to tackle this subject of unconscious bias and race and inclusion, diversity. So for me, I think we all need to spend a lot more time listening, a lot more time educating ourselves on the history of, particularly in America. It's we all need to do better. We've taken this topic head on, and we're dealing with it in an internal way, in a something we called being color brave versus color blind. And a friend of mine, Melody Hobson, came up with that term, and she does a whole series on it. So we will be doing town halls about inclusivity. We're setting up forums for our employees to have safe environments for them to talk about things that have happened to them, talk about experiences. Certainly, we're looking at the makeup of our company, and where we see an opportunity is more leadership roles. But let me just start by saying diversity, inclusivity, to me, makes a company better. It's something that we have been working on for a long time, but I love the idea of having all kinds of people around weighing in. And I think that's what makes our company unique and special. That said, we could be doing better, and we are, and we're holding ourselves accountable.
I mean, one of the things that people have written to me about, which I thought was really striking and actually relevant, is the fact that, a lot of sizing of fashion is based on white bodies. And that is a form of also like velvet roping and elitism. And I wondered what, Gwyneth, what do you think about that? Is that something you guys have ever considered?
Yeah, I mean, we make our line for as many body types as possible. It's very comfortable fashion, and I think that we go up to a size 14, and there's demand for that, and it has been really interesting. It's why I invested in a brand called Universal Standard, and we did a collaboration with them. For example, they're an amazing brand, and they're size 00 all the way up. And I do think that what women wear is so much a part of what they're saying to the world and want to say about themselves, and to exclude women because of their size is wrong. And so I think it's something that we all have to work harder at doing, just inclusivity in general, in every way, try to help women eliminate the shame that they feel around any part of who they are or what their size is.
I mean, Virgil, do you think there's an issue in that, some of the ways that, the traditional kind of hierarchies of fashion are created, and the additional, traditional talent streams come from very specific schools and, networks, and that, we just need to think more broadly about, like, what is a fashion designer? What is a fashion executive? Where do people, where do we find talent?
100%. And you're dialing in on the sort of unconscious bias that's just been created over years of how the industry has looked and how it's been done. 2020 shows us that this matter is urgent. Like, we as a community need to look at it with new eyes and see how disproportionately Black people are treated in this country, whether it be from a virus or whether it be at the hands of police brutality. And us as a fashion industry, this is our occupation, but it also projects an image. That's what you see when you drive down Houston Street, or you drive down, in the airport looking at advertisements. We have the ability to, in fact, change, and the change that we want to see. So for me, it's an urgent issue, and it needs to be tackled at like 12 different points, not just one initiative. I started my postmodern
Name some of the 12.
but I started my postmodern scholarship fund to start at the education level, putting students through school, Black students that are putting them on the track, but that's not enough. That starts with my fashion team that did my most recent LV show. We're showing and proving that a diverse group of talents, from stylists to, myself, obviously the creatives, we can see great creative gains. We can see great social media gains, and who made that team, and sales gains, obviously, but who made that team is the next generation of young Black creatives. So it's A to Z, and all the 10 different points in between, so that we can pick our heads up in a year and see some change. For me, it's urgent.
I mean, one of the things that I'm often struck by when I look at, like, all the new ad campaigns, or all the new magazine covers, or, all the shows, is that so often, despite the fact that, fashion is a very big industry and has a very big reach, everyone uses the exact same 3 photographers, or the same 3 stylists, or the same 1 guy to do the music, or the same 2 major show producers. And, I think part of the challenge probably for all of us is to try and, like, be more original and brave in, the different people we reach out to create to create your vision.
Yeah, that's what obviously this issue is very much a top priority, because leading by example, my studio is meant to exist to lead, like I said before, thought leading, and how I activate. A lot of my talent that I'm employing is from different segments of culture, not the fashion industry. This is sometimes their first time being engaged to do a large campaign. And what you see is a breath of fresh air, and you see as a new opportunity. And I think, I hope to lead by example, to say that this is a new method that works. I'm very honored that Mr. Arnault and Michael Burke brought me to LV 3 years ago to lead the house. And, we led with an inclusive, diverse mission statement, and we haven't left that message since. And we're seeing great effects from that. And what I don't want to see is just campaigns, for a 6-month period that feel diverse, and what I don't want to see is just the image of diversity. We really need that as a Black community, and we're just asking for the opportunity to sit at the table.
Antoine, you wanted to say something?
I think one of the few positive outcomes of this pandemic is that we're going to work much more with the local communities. For the moment, when we're doing a show, I don't know, in LA, we're bringing everyone from Paris to actually work on that show. We're flying 60 or 70 models. We're flying the hair, the makeup, everybody. From now on, we decided for most of these brands, and in most of these events or these shootings or anything we do that's related with this industry, to work with local talent. And of course, it's not only about diversity, but it's also, probably getting out of this little mafia that it's always the same people. And you're right, when you open any magazine, you see that it's literally always the same 3 photographers, always the same hair and makeup, and mostly always the same people working. So I think that's going to end with this pandemic.
Tory, do you agree? Do you have similar sort of new ideas for things?
I mean, I think the pandemic has given us the ability, and to Virgil's point, to create lasting change in everything we do. And whether, I would say fundamentally our strategy hasn't changed of our company. Certainly we've accelerated different things, and we're a purpose-led business. But I think it gives us the ability to reset what we talk about, how we interact with our customer, how we produce things, how we shoot things. how we work on product. We're also thinking, what will the office look like at the end of the pandemic? Because certainly people are getting used to working in this way, in a virtual way. Our office will not officially be open at least until January. So I think it's a time that has given people the ability to reflect and think about how we can really cement institutional change that is positive for the world. And certainly when you're talking about issues around race, we need to make sure that these are not just a change during the pandemic and for the next 6 months. We need to make sure that we're creating the ability to educate people where they want to have lasting change, and we will. I'm very excited, and I said it to my boys, for the first time in my lifetime, I feel that things are at a place where we can set the path for the future.
Okay, well, we've got a couple audience questions that we're gonna ask you guys now. Mo says, if you've just started out in this industry or are yet to start a practice and want to make it work economically, what might a new generation of fashion creators try to get right from the start? What old fashion mechanisms will soon belong to the past? Gwyneth, you just started a business, so what old fashioned mechanism should go out the window?
I mean, look, I think that scrappiness is key, being incredibly authentic and staying close to your vision and what you want to do. And whatever comes out of that, whatever practice comes out of that for a young creator, that is where I think people find resonance with a customer. It's like, create your vision, be really sharp about it, hold it close to your heart, and then, you know, for us, we just, you know, during the pandemic, we've gotten super scrappy and we've slashed every marketing budget, and we've done things with iPhones, and we've been able to make an impact. So, I mean, I think creativity is probably stronger and more alive than ever. And, you know, when it's when a business is under a bit of pressure and you're having to get closest to that creative spirit, I think anything is possible. And now more than ever, I'm seeing brands able to start without big amounts of funding. They're just starting and they're just putting things out in the world. I mean, it's the upside of social media, which doesn't always have much of an upside.
Antoine, if you could dump anything, if you were like, I can start again, I can start completely with a fresh slate, and there's something you wouldn't do that, you know, as the proprietor of so many legacy brands you've inherited, what would you not, you know, what would you tell them not to do?
Well, listen, I think we're going to see some sort of restructuring in the next few months and maybe the next couple of years, where the big brands are going to be fine, and we see already, you know, they're almost booming right now, despite the pandemic and the crisis. The small brands have a certain agility that makes them extremely capable of moving through even these rough waters. But being in charge myself of an intermediate brand, let's say that's Berluti, where you take decisions that are extremely important and cost a lot of money when you open even one store in one city, or you open or you decide to have this big communication campaign with this movie star. These decisions and these brands are, in my opinion, the ones that will suffer the most, these intermediate brands. So I would probably have pushed back these super important decisions and try to be more into an agile world, and where you know, and I'm not saying Berluti is in danger. Huh? I'm just saying that it's this agility that when you're at a certain size and this sort of middle to big size you lack is something that I would like to get back.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tori, I think this is for you. Katie says, have you changed how you advertise or which products you show in advertisements? And where are you seeing the most success?
You know, it's funny, we've never done traditional advertising. We've never, when I first launched the business 15 years ago, a couple of things. I was told no one would ever buy online. I launched with e-commerce 15 years ago, and people thought I was crazy and said that no one would ever buy online. But the way we looked at connecting with the customer was we were early adapters with everything social. So we have not done traditional advertising. That said, when we use certain social channels that way. So has the product changed? I think I've now have a certain CEO that's taken over my company, and I've been happy to give up that title. So for the last 2 years, I am finding a bit of a reinvention for myself, and I'm now solely doing the creative, and it's the best thing that has ever happened to me on many levels, personal, but also business. But I love doing the product. So I'm very proud of where the product is getting. So we are showing certain pieces that I think are more special. And I go back to people wanting special things. I really stand by that.
And Virgil, what do you think with their advertising? Is it all going out the window?
I think it's funny because I'm thinking about the last question and this one too. It's all like we said the word trend before, and what customers care about. And Antoine, what you said is like always thinking about the people listening to this panel are the ones with the answers. We're just in positions to sort of translate and hopefully be in tune. So I think customers are now considering their purchase like a vote. You know, they're considering, do I align with this brand? That predicates before looking at an advertisement to see if they want it. You know, they're looking at how the brand shows up for their issues. And to that previous question, I think, you know, the shorthand answer is the epicenter is now the fringe. You know, I think we traditionally had a mind of what the target consumer is, what the target way to advertise. And I would say that the fringe is now the future. You know, creativity coming from non-traditional places like Africa can be the new Berlin or the new Paris, or just the way we turn our lens towards value and who's contributing. That's where we're going to see the new gains in the future of the industry.
All right, final question.
Vanessa, can I just add one thing to that? Because I think it's really important, what something that Virgil just said. And the customer is totally focused on what the brand stands for and purpose-led brands, particularly younger customers. They deeply care about what brands are doing to make the world a better place. And I think that's really important when you're talking about starting a business. And that was to think about social entrepreneurship. I'm obsessed with the concept of that. I always have been. But I think to be able to use your platform to make the world a better place is a great thing for people to think about when they start their business.
But how do you do that in a way that doesn't feel like it's kind of
like preachy?
Yeah, or like a sort of, you know, superficial layer that you've dressed yourself up in. You know, how do you make it really genuine?
Well, I think it has to be genuine and authentic. I mean, you don't want to just pick a charity. I think you have to think about what you deeply care about, and then you have to be authentically activating that. And people see through that. Certainly with social media, as Gwyneth pointed out, you have to be very authentic.
I mean, Antoine, one of the things I find, you know, interesting is that, you know, you talk about LVMH's sustainability initiatives and having been going on for 20 years. But you guys actually didn't talk about it very publicly until recently. You know, was that part of this tension that, like, you know, if you are the kind of glossiest of luxury brands and you talk about your ethics or your morality, people tend to, you know, always want to find the holes in it or to see it as inauthentic?
Listen, as you know, there was a culture of discretion around the group and around what it did. Because, you know, it's in my father's values and it's in his genes. He doesn't really like to talk about what he does, even when it's really, really good. So he was not difficult to convince, though, when I took over this part of the business and told him, listen, we cannot be this big and hide everything we do. And you know, it looks almost suspicious when you do all these right things. And at a moment where meaning is so important for everyone, for customers, of course, but for future collaborators as well. I mean, it's now almost their first question in any job interview you do is, okay, guys, what do you do on the sustainability issues? Explain me more what this life project is. And many of them actually challenge us on all these topics. So he understood quite quickly, and we just changed our way of speaking about it.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question because we are running out of time. This is for all of you, so I'll just call on you one at a time. Final lightning round. And it is not the most optimistic note to end on, but I do think it is an important note. Ian asks, what plans and strategies do you have if COVID continues for, say, at least 2 more years? It's a little doomsday here. Virgil, plans and strategies.
So I get it first. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you to the question. But thankfully, I'm an optimist, and I bought into that when I was like 4 years old. So my question will go as such. You know, I think of it as time to sort of be introspective and to like slow down. That's not a bad thing. You know, I think if it was 2019, there was this collective race. So, you know, using this time to sort of readjust and pause just allows for more heartfelt work. So my formal answer is that there's a silver lining, even if this continues for another 2 years, for us to have these sort of discussions as we are as an industry to sort of question what we're doing and sort of make heartfelt suggestions afterwards.
Gwyneth, 2 more years?
Oh, wow. Well, I hope that that's not the case. But I think in terms of business strategies, if COVID were to carry on, you know, I think what we've seen is that people really want to feel we're home, and in a sense, we're isolated, even though many of us are with our closest family, but we've lost a little bit of that exploration out in the world. And so people are really coming back to content and education and feeling connection with the community in a digital way. I think it's achievable. And I think we'll just continue to double down on our content strategy and adjacent product that is, you know, helpful to the customer.
Tory, 2 more years?
Well, I have a way not to make it 2 more years. I started a wear a damn mask campaign. So I would suggest everyone to wear masks so we can get through this. But I think we're finding a new normal of how to run a business virtually. And I think that I do think it's a lot about having time to think, having time to process, really honing in on exactly what is truly important. Product is everything at this time to be able to work on. But I think I'm an optimist too. I look for silver linings, and it's nice to have a reset, but I think people want to feel a sense of normalcy even during that time. So if we can give people things to do to achieve that, that would be great.
Antoine?
I think no matter how you look at it, whether you're an optimist, a realist, or a pessimist, 2021 will be a super crucial year for all of our businesses. If it gets better, it's going to be a huge rebound year, but you know, you're going to have to be ready to actually surf that wave. And if it goes bad and the pandemic continues, well, we'll have to be even more creative and more agile. But we've been through the crash now. You know, now there's this period where we have to adapt to what's happening. So we've been able to do it so far. Let's continue. But in my opinion, 2021 will be hyper crucial.
Yes, and hopefully a year where not everyone is wearing sweatpants. Thank you guys so much to everyone for joining us today. And thank you especially to Gwyneth, Antoine, Tory, and Virgil for being here. This is just the first in a series of live digital events we'll be hosting for the next month on Instagram and Zoom, bringing together more top voices in the industry from around the world. The Times is also going to be streaming the shows, both live and digital, from New York, Milan, and Paris, and continue to offer insights and exclusives on the season. Next up will be an Instagram live session on Friday at 12:20 Eastern Time, where my colleague Elizabeth Payton and myself will address more viewer questions about what's going on with fashion, shopping, clothes, supply chains, anything you want to know. So send your questions to questions@newyorktimes.com and tune in, because after that, it's going to get even more close up and behind the scenes. In the meantime, follow us on Instagram at New York Times Fashion for more. Thank you. Bye.